All right, welcome to the moment that basically a lot of people thought would never happen. Dave Nordahl versus Kevin Logan in a debate about, I guess, feminism and social justice activism. I've got three questions. I'll start off with a question, and then we'll have a conversation about it. I didn't mention this in the pre-show, but is an hour acceptable, Kevin?
Yeah, whatever. I'm in no rush whatsoever, however long it goes.
Okay. So I guess we'll start off. First question. How and why is feminism needed in today's modern Western world?
Right. Well, there are a number of reasons why it's necessary in the modern world, but I'd just like to start with, I think you in the video where you accepted this debate, and indeed it's a more general anti-fem talking point. It's the false paradigm of, two false paradigms. Firstly, that feminism should only be concerned with legal matters. Like often the question is, well, what rights do women not have that men do have, or whatever. Feminism, certainly in the modern era, has never been just about legal rights. It's about cultural matters as well. And secondly, even if we were a put upon group in society, that would not negate the necessity for feminism. It would just mean that we would need a proper functioning men's rights movement worthy of that name, which is something we unfortunately do not have. But anyway, as aside from that, there are a number of reasons why feminism is necessary. And I think it's especially strange that you, as an American, and an American who follows politics, would ask that question, considering the war that's being waged against reproductive rights in America right now. You have not just the active push to try and defund Planned Parenthood, but in certain states, it's almost impossible to get, no, it's your legal right to do so as a woman. You can't necessarily actually get hold of an abortion clinic anymore because they've been shut down due to one reason or another. And so essentially, even though it's a legal right, it's not actually legally attainable. And so what you're doing is forcing women into the situation they were in previously, where unsafe abortion techniques are being practiced. You have obviously the continued underrepresentation of women in parliaments across the world. In every country in the world where there is a parliament, women are the minority. The same is true for the most part with boardrooms and media editorial teams and so on and so forth. You have the unsafe working conditions of sex workers, which, regardless of whether you're a sex positive or a sex negative, kind of what do they call them, swerve feminist, the safety of sex workers is a huge issue, and indeed sexual trafficking, which continues to happen. Now, this is a controversial one, but I would suggest that regardless of how you chop it up, there is still a problem here. Either the wage gap or the pay gap, depending on how you want to slice it up, that's still an issue. That's something that needs to be addressed. And actually, it's just helping Western women as well, because helping Western women actually can and does help women as well. Because, for instance, one of the reasons that Saudi Arabia, which is often cited as one of the, and rightly cited as an incredibly patriarchal society where women are shit upon by their government, you have one of the reasons that they're allowed to do so is Western governments have been very, very friendly to them, bought the massive amounts of their oil, and indeed then accepted some of that money back in the form of billions of dollars of arms deals, which they're now using to slaughter people, innocent men, women, and children in Yemen. And basically, if we were to elect more, not even feminist politicians necessarily, but more feminist-minded people who have genuine human rights concerns at the heart of their foreign policy agenda in Western governments, you would have a potentially huge revolutionary impact on the way in which non-Western women live their lives. And finally, just to finish off, once you add in intersectionality to feminism, you then bring in a huge number of other issues to do with race and sexuality and transgenderism and economic deprivation and all sorts, which I think all round, built together, regardless of whether you think it's a good movement in the way it's constructed, is clearly a movement that is necessary in the Western world.
Okay. I suppose I'll go back to your first point. We do have a functioning MRA movement. And it's mainly concerned with legal rights, like the fact that when a man enters a divorce court or a custody court, he might as well enter through a door called "Abandon hope, ye men who enter here." They're mainly concerned with men getting a fairer shot in divorce settlements, men getting a fairer shot in their children's custody, because all a woman has to say in a divorce court is, well, sometimes he kind of gets angry and that guy will lose custody of his kids and be forced to go to anger management class, just on nothing more than her good word alone. And any other court, good word means about as much as a fucking McDonald's Happy Meal. Not a whole lot. Now, you do have a point on abortion, and I agree with that. Women should have the right to have an abortion. And I say this because I find it hypocritical when conservatives say abortion's wrong and murder, but have no problem with the state murdering a prisoner. I personally don't give a shit either way. I love the death penalty. I love abortions. And also, I just don't want to pay for it. That's the other thing. If we have all these kids, somebody's got to pay for them. And, okay, but then you bring up a point with feminists that drives me batty.
So can I just come back on the MRA point quickly?
All right.
You say it's a functioning movement. It isn't in any practical sense.
Well,
it exists, but it's not really a movement as such. It's mainly men on the internet calling their ex-wives cunts and whores, which isn't particularly practical, and of course means that the second point that you made about them being focused on legal rights, it completely negates that, because no politician with any opportunity to actually change those laws is going to go near someone like Paul Elam because of the horrific shit he has said and done over the years.
Well, there's a thing. The problem is the legit movement that actually deals with actual issues that men face in divorce, unfortunately gets drowned out by the MGTOWs. And there's a difference between an MRA and a MGTOW.
Yes.
MGTOWs blame feminism for everything. Their steak is cold at Outback, it's feminists' fault. So, you know, I make the distinction between an MRA and a MGTOW.
True, but
MGTOWs blame feminists for everything. Same thing as
MRAs.
Go ahead.
I would suggest that MRAs blame feminism for 99% of things instead. The distinction in that respect is slightly moot. The distinction I would draw is that MGTOWs are more conspiratorial in the sense that they think that there's some sort of female hive mind and they're all scum. Whereas MRAs, I think, generally are more normal human beings, if that makes sense.
Well, feminists have the same thing with the patriarchy myth that all men are working behind the scenes to make sure that women are kept down.
No. That's a straw man. No serious feminist suggests
you just said that. Well, hey, look, we're probably going to have to just disagree on this one because I really want to get to this next one.
Okay.
We can circle back to the MRA argument in a bit, but you brought up the point, and a lot of feminists bring this up, that women are underrepresented in Parliament, the U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress. We've never had a woman president. But here's my counter argument to that. As for public elected office, tell women to run. Tell women to get on the ballot.
Yeah,
I mean, feminism is about choice, correct? They're choosing not to run.
Yeah, but the reason you have to ask yourself, why are women choosing not to run? Is it solely because there's something innate within women that means that they don't want to run for political office, or that they don't enjoy that kind of work? Or, but actually it's not a dichotomy, there's a potential for both to be true, but it's to the degree to which they're true. Is there something about society, about the way the media treats women? And I would point you toward a very recent Daily Mail headline when you had the British Prime Minister and the Scottish First Minister, both females, and instead of taking them seriously as they would with male politicians, they had a headline on the very front page of them, one of the leading papers in the country, asking who won the debate on who had the best legs, which is pretty fucking demeaning for two very serious career politicians who have gotten to the top of their profession.
Oh, okay.
Women are
Let me counter you with
that way.
In
Yeah.
America, I have seen I don't know how many women's websites and articles ranking the best looking male politicians. What's the difference? We're sexual creatures, Kevin. We're attracted to 99 or 90% of the time the opposite sex. So women
Yes.
objectify men, men objectify women.
Yeah,
As
but
for
there's a difference between a specialist interest website, that being a women's website you were suggesting, ranking male politicians on attractiveness. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't want to try and find people attractive, or that if you find them attractive, you're wrong in some way. It's that if you're having serious political discourse, as they should be on the front page of a daily newspaper, they in the way that they would about men, if it were two men, they would not treat them that way. They would not objectify them sexually in that way. That's the difference.
I don't have the article, but somebody in the chat literally said that that article was wrote by another woman. And honestly, the harshest critics of women's appearance are other women, not men.
Yeah, I don't think that. Absolutely. I'm not suggesting it's a matter of just men being the problem here. You will be aware of a thing which is often derided, but is actually a thing called internalized misogyny. And I think that this is an example. This is an example of that, where you have a woman playing into the misogyny game, in the newspaper, and being allowed to in a way that they wouldn't if they wrote exactly the same article but about two male politicians.
Do you know what I view internalized misogyny is? This is feminists attempting to justify why a woman would be against their movement, because quite frankly, their movement has no reason to exist anymore. Can I move on to the private sector a little bit? Your thing about the boardrooms. Okay, again, and this is why the pay gap is a myth. It's the reason women don't, quote unquote, reach the tippy top is the career choices they make. Women tend to take jobs that are not upwardly mobile, but allow them to have more family time. Women take more time off of work. Women go on more vacations. Women call in sick more. Women don't work the overtime that men do. Men typically get a career and they're tunnel vision on it to reach that, smash the glass ceiling, blah, blah, blah. Women, especially once they have kids, they kind of, don't mind being moms.
Yeah.
There's a reason why women are not getting to the top, and it has nothing to do with the male CEO going, well, let's see, I've got this woman here, and she's overly qualified for this job, but you know what? This guy P's standing up, and even though I don't think he could do the job, I'm going to give it to him. That doesn't happen.
Why is your CEO the rooster from fucking Looney Tunes? What's
I don't know. I had to change up the voice somehow.
Anyway, one quick clarification. The reason I mentioned the wage gap and the pay gap, because it depends which angle you want to look at it from. You're denying the existence of a wage gap, but not a pay gap, correct?
I'm denying the existence of both.
Of both.
The pay gap, if you want to,
strange, because it's
pay gap
true that women do earn on average less than men, but you're saying that's because of career choices, right?
Yes.
So that's a pay gap, not a wage gap.
Because of their career choices.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a pay gap rather than a wage gap. Yeah. I know it's technical, whatever, but they do earn less on average. That's the point. And so no matter whether you want to call it a wage gap or a pay gap, it just changes what needs to be done in order to try and correct some of that difference.
Okay. Well, what's your solution then?
Well, I don't have an absolutely concrete solution, and I don't think there is a concrete solution. But what you can do is change the way in which socialization takes place, change the way in which education is focused, to try and open up some of those other careers to women, and indeed try and open up some of the more female-centered employment opportunities that might be more suited to certain men. For instance, nursing, which is with the stigma around male nurses, because nurse is traditionally seen as a female thing, but it might suit certain men. And so if you open that up, it actually helps both men and women, and would help neutralize some of that difference. Also, you have women decide biologically they're the only ones that can give birth, right? And so they're going to have to take time off. So for the continuation of the species, we are dependent upon women doing that. And so I don't think they should be penalized in terms of their jobs. And that would require certain legislation to be put in place where businesses are not allowed to discriminate in ways that they currently are allowed to discriminate because women decide to take some time off work to have children.
Oh, okay. Getting back to your first point of this, women are already able to go into whatever career they choose. They choose to go into lower paying jobs often because it's easier. Okay, a woman can become a programmer. They just choose not to. A woman can become an oil rig worker. They just choose not to. A woman can become whatever she wants to be. They just choose not to. Also, in the reverse side, there are men that the vast majority of men, let's say, don't want to go into 0 to 3 childhood education. Okay, they just don't want to do it. Getting back to your pay gap, though, the only solution would be either A, we pay women more for less work, or B, we start just, I don't know, paying men less. Men choose to do jobs that pay more because typically they're either harder jobs, physically, mentally, require more time. And again, there's a plethora of reasons why the pay gap, wage gap, maybe the pay gap exists, but there's a logical reason as to why. Men work more.
Yeah,
and we work the dangerous, hard jobs that pay more. Women, why should a guy, like, let's take a power plant. Why should the guy that's working in the sweaty, hot, dirty, dangerous part of the plant get paid the same as the woman who's sitting in the air-conditioned office being a receptionist?
I'm not suggesting for a second that should be the case, and it doesn't need to be the case, because I'm not suggesting that this is a problem that you could ever get around 100%. Maybe there is I don't say maybe, almost certainly there is a part of female nature, if you want to say, or female biology, that leads them to want to have more spare time to go into, say, child rearing or whatever, or just to have more family time. Fine. But in terms of them going into the higher paid professions, what is it about those higher paid professions that means that women aren't wanting to go into them? Is there something we could do in terms of socialization, in terms of education, in terms of
no, because
like this necessarily, but affirmative action to try and get them into those higher paying positions, make a dent in the problem, if not necessarily solving it completely?
Okay. First off, let's be clear. There are women CEOs. There are women in these positions, but typically they've sacrificed families.
Yeah.
The thing is, at one point you're dealing with nature, and women are way more maternal, parenty than men. It goes back to the caveman days of, woman stayed behind and took care of the cave and the kids, and man went out and beat the shit out of a mammoth.
Okay, I think you've got a bit of a Flintstones view of the world there, but I accept the general point you're making. There is undoubtedly a biological element to this, but that we are beyond the point. I know you've taken the caveman look on for yourself, but as humans in general, we are the caveman era now, and we can do things to try and negate some of our more primitive thinking necessarily. And one of those things might be affirmative action. One of them might be the way in which we socialize girls. I think it was misguided, but well-intentioned, the ban bossy thing. That kind of putting women in, or putting young girls into a certain box socially, which then has a massive impact on their potential future life decisions. If we can affect those things in positive ways, I think that would have an impact down the line on these issues. It doesn't have to be a matter of paying men less or paying women more. That because there are a plethora of issues that lead to this, to the pay gap existing, a varied selection of different options in terms of trying to have an impact upon it, because it's not just one brick wall that we're bashing our head against. There's lots and lots of different angles we can attack this problem from.
Again, girls are already encouraged way more than boys to go into sciences, and they still don't. If you look at again, the vast majority of who's earning I'll call them the easy, useless degrees, it's women. You know, you take a look at the practical degrees, they're still earned by men. Again, they have the opportunity, they just don't want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, again, and the only way you're ever going to quote unquote get around this problem is literally if you force women to go into a field they don't want to go in. You know, like having...
Not necessarily at all, no. Because when you're talking about them being pushed toward science, you're talking primarily about, say, high school, right? At that sort of stage, they're being pushed toward science.
Okay.
By that time, the young human that we're talking about is basically being formed. Their likes and dislikes have been formed. The way in which they think and the potential future life decisions they're going to make have all been impressed upon enormously by society and by the education system. It's far too late by the time they get to high school.
No, I'm talking about when it's in elementary school. They're encouraged far more than boys in elementary school, and that's when their likes and dislikes and all that stuff is still forming, but they haven't gone through puberty yet, and that can change.
I could maybe it's different in America, but certainly in Britain, I don't think that that's the case. But if it's that's true in America, then that's clearly something to take into account. I'd have to look into that further, though.
Well, I can't remember the campaign, but yeah, it was about all that. But okay, speaking of culture and all that, your last point on the first question, what is your solution for Saudi Arabia outside of us going to war? Because the women over there, remember, these are the women who set up a online thing called My Guardian Knows What's Best for Me. And these are women that are literally saying that their 9-year-old son, if anything happens to the dad, he is the head of the household. He knows what's best for grown women because Allah said it. These are women that I have gotten into arguments with that literally will defend to their hilt the submissive role in Islam. And these are Western Muslim women, not Saudi Arabian.
Well, firstly, that's a shifting of the goalpost, because you started off by talking about Saudi Arabian women, so that's what I thought you were referring to. Secondly, the bringing it back, linking it back to the point we were talking about, internalized misogyny. Saudi Arabia is a perfect microcosm of what feminists are talking about, but it's a much softer, less rigid, structured thing in the West. The internalized misogyny of many Saudi women, for instance, is because it's absolutely driven into them from the moment they are born, subservient, and that women are essentially lesser than men. And you can see that when they then grow up to say, you know, my guardian knows best. That's a perfect example of what internalized misogyny is. That's literally what that is. It's a softer, more insidious in many ways, cultural thing, rather than it being a strictly imposed legal thing in Saudi Arabia. On to the point about going to war or not, this is a really strange thing, and it's not just you, but as I'm talking to you specifically, that you have a very black and white way of looking at these things. That it's with the pay gap, it's either you pay men less or pay women more, rather than looking at softer options. And in Saudi Arabia, you're starting to see some progress because Western governments have put some small amount of pressure on them. And for instance, you've got in the local councils, in places like Medina and Mecca, not Mecca, sorry, Riyadh. You've got female council members now, for instance, because they've had certain amount of elections and women have been allowed to stand. And this is how we can get around it. You don't have to go to war. War should always be the absolutely last option. What you can do is say, we have what the Saudis absolutely need, Western money. They have what we need in oil, true, but we can get oil from other places. They really can't get money from other places. They do need our money, and they do need our weapons. In order to do that, we can have soft power over them. Not hard power, not military power, because I don't want us to go to fucking war with Saudi Arabia. That would start a huge fucking issue, because that's the land of Mecca and all of that, and that Muslims around the world are going to go fucking crazy. So it's best not to fucking start that thing, because that's not a war that anyone can fucking win. Humanity loses. But what we can do is have a huge force on the Saudi government to say, look, you have to ease up on this fucking patriarchal, misogynistic shit, where, for instance, it takes 2 women's say to overrule a man's say in a court. So basically women are, in legal terms, that can be done away with. You don't need to go to war with them. You can put pressure on them. It's diplomacy. It's how it works. And we can have an effect there. We already have had some amount of effect there, and we can continue that process, and then we can have a development in that society rather than having to go to war with them.
Okay. First off, again, I'm harping on the internalized misogyny. Again, isn't feminism about choice? So if a woman, if that's what they want, and they want to be subservient to a man, is that not their choice? Speaking for Saudi Arabia,
that's not a free. That's not a freely made choice, though.
Speaking for Saudi Arabia, though, yeah, let me get to that. You brought up how we could put pressure on them. They're going to tell us to go fuck ourselves. We're going to run out of oil and crawl back to them, because Lord knows none of the fucking environmentalists will let us drill here. So where are we going to get our oil? And our whole society, the whole Western society, lives off of oil. You know, they're just going to go tell, you know, literally, it's their culture. And that's the other thing. You guys are the ones that are always saying we have to respect other cultures. Well, this is their culture. Whether it's right or wrong is somewhat irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant in the slightest, no.
Well,
no.
So what? I'm not.
I can't speak for other people.
You guys are the ones that are constantly saying respect other cultures, respect other cultures. This is their culture. It sucks. It's a piece of shit culture. Our culture's better, but
it's
again,
well, I don't subscribe to the idea that just because it's their culture you have to accept it. Not at all. I've got no problem with them practicing their religion if they want to. But I think it's absolutely incumbent upon all people to try and make sure that human rights abuses are stopped. And that's what's taking place in Saudi Arabia. I don't give a fuck if some other person that you label an SJW or a cultural relativist or whatever you want to call them says otherwise. I can only really speak for me and my position, and that is that the Saudi Arabian government is utterly immoral and needs to be changed.
And, you know, you said I have a black and white view of looking at the world. Yeah. Unfortunately, Kevin, that's what works. The pay gap, it's black and white. If you break it down, there's a reason women earn less. If you break it down, there's a reason, you know, Islam the way it is. Black and white, simple. Gray solutions, simple, but it doesn't. Gray solutions typically don't work. They're just band-aids.
I would argue completely the opposite. The American system of government, for instance, is set up as grey. It's set up to have compromise and checks and balances. It's not all, and this is not true or whatever. There's a whole system and network in place, and that's held together particularly well for 300 years. I would go down the line of, if you say that Islam is, or the way you deal with Islam should be black and white, why is it that there are huge numbers of peaceful Muslims around the world and huge numbers of violent Muslims around the world? It's clearly not a black and white thing. Clearly it's dependent on where they live, the culture they brought up in, The legal system they have to abide by. Poverty is obviously a huge indicator of the way in which this is going to go. Whether you get bombed by either by your own side or by foreign powers, you know, dropping the mother of all bombs or whatever on top of you. These things all have a huge impact on this. It's not black and white. The world is a much more complex place than I think you give it credit for.
Yeah. As for the United States government being a section of gray, I could argue that's why nothing's happening right now, because the two sides have gone black and white. That's why nothing's getting done. That's why we're down to, like, I think, six Supreme Court justices, because no matter who the Republicans field, the Democrats won't give them the nod. No matter who the Democrats field, the Republicans won't give them the nod.
A quick clarification there. You're actually back up to 9 now. You're up to the full complement.
But, well, the last I heard.
Gorsuch was appointed on last Saturday, Friday, whenever. But yeah, exactly. But you're now arguing against your own point, because you were saying black and white works, and you're now saying because the two sides have gone black and white, it's now not working.
Well, there's a difference between trying to come up with laws and elect people and have the government work versus societal problems as a whole. You know, this goes to macro and micro. But
I don't see that that's true, because, including the US Congress and Senate, are merely arbiters put in place by the people. They are reflections of the society that put them there. Warcorpse.
You might have a point. But I don't know. I tend to think, well, keep in mind, we're also debating a single topic, so it's easier to get into a situation of black and white. But let's move on to the second question. How does social justice activists or social justice warriors still work, or how are they still for social justice if they cause a fucking riot, destroy property, cause hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in damages, because somebody is giving a talk they don't like or don't agree with?
Yeah. Firstly, I would ask, how exactly are you defining social justice warrior or social justice? Because this is always the problem when getting into these kind of discussions, is that social justice and social justice warrior have become so elastic as to basically mean anything. I mean, for instance, Thunderfoot called you a social justice warrior, and you're demonstrably not that. So what does that even mean as a phrase anymore?
You know, again, I think it started off as, here's the thing, if I were to go with the definition of social justice warriors, like you go with the definition of feminists, what the definition is and what they've become are two completely different things. Okay, I'll rephrase the question. What do you think about people who mostly identify as social justice warriors causing a riot to shut down a talk by somebody they don't like? You know, again, the movement, again, its definition, I think a social justice warrior by definition is somebody who, I don't know, fights for equality or some shit. But what the movement has become versus what it started out as is two completely different things, much like feminism.
Okay, I'll basically go along with that. And there are things I could pick up there, but it's really not. That would be pernickety of me. So we'll go with that. Okay. I'm not for rioting to shut down a talk. That's not to say I'm against rioting full stop. I think rioting has its place. I think Martin Luther King summed it rather well when he said the riot is the language of the unheard. I think rioting has its place when peaceful activism doesn't get you anywhere. And secondly, so yeah, I'm not for that, and I'm not for no platforming either. I think that's a productive thing, because you make it taboo, and when something becomes taboo, people are drawn toward it more than they would ever be if Milo just turned up and there was no brouhaha surrounding it. People wouldn't give a fuck because it's just some random British guy turning up. But when you make a big spectacle of it, you draw attention. It's not the Streisand effect. When you try and ban something, you make it infinitely more popular because people pay attention to it. But what I would also bring up as a way of showing that it's not just SJWs that go down this line is that actually one of the things that's not mentioned is that when Milo's talk at, was it Berkeley possibly, when there was a riot, there was actually a Milo fan that shot a guy. Like he was infinitely worse than smashing windows, because that's a human being that's being potentially destroyed. Thankfully, the guy didn't die, but he was hospitalized and presumably lost a lot of time either at school or at work or whatever. So it's not just the social justice warriors that are doing that. But no, I wouldn't defend a social justice warrior that's rioting about a talk. I think there are ways in which you can peacefully protest something if you want to, but rioting isn't. I don't think the answer in that situation. So I'm not going to defend that. But in general, social justice, like you say, I think in general it is just about trying to fight for equality, really. And I don't see that that's a bad thing. And it's easy for people, and I'm not going to put you solely in this. I think it's a widespread thing, certainly on the internet. It's very easy to pick out extreme examples or silly examples. You know, the things that come to mind of people like, say, Big Red or I don't know her name, Triddlypuff, whatever her name is, and point to that and say, oh, look, they're all like this group X person. But actually, for the most part, they're not that. For the most part, they're really peaceful, nice human beings. That if you just got to know them and talk to them, they're not the evil people you think they might be.
Well, I don't think that they're evil, but I can tell you they almost do have a hive mind, because I tend to go after them far more than you, so I've dealt with them a little bit more. As for putting up a big spectacle of it, the only spectacle that I won't talk about Berkeley in particular, but another talk Milo and some other people were giving, all they did was put up posters, and the posters were ripped down. And these people protest anytime anyone goes up to speak that doesn't agree. They don't agree with 150%. I mean, look at the brouhaha that George Takei caused. Do you want to know what he did? All he did was, in the new Star Trek movie, I think Star Trek Beyond, it showed him with his daughter and husband. George Takei said this character Sulu isn't gay. Everybody jumped all over him. Every single SJW and SJA and gay rights, whatever, jumped all over him because he said a fictional character that he played in a TV show wasn't gay. The actor is, but, you know, again. And
also, that's not really his decision, is it? Surely that's the writer's decision.
Yes, and it's set up in an alternate time. Personally, the whole thing was stupid, but the fact that they went bananas on him when literally 15 minutes before that he was this beloved gay icon, just for simply uttering an opinion over a fictional character in a fictional movie.
Hang on, what you're saying? Star Trek's fiction?
Yes,
I'm not convinced.
Because
I saw Leonard Nimoy, and he was definitely real. He exists. I can tell you.
He's not Mr. Spock, and you won't be getting visited by the Easter Bunny tomorrow either, Kevin.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be getting visited by Leonard Nimoy either, because he had the rudeness to go and die. Fuck's sake.
The guy who did shoot the one guy at the Milo event, if I remember correctly, I don't have it with me, obviously, but I believe he was getting attacked, and he pulled out a gun and he warned the guy, "I'm going to shoot you if you persist." He persisted. In my country, whether you agree with it or not, there's concealed carry, there's stand your ground, you have the right to defend yourself, you know. as for this is you're not going to agree with. I would argue what inequality we've achieved equality. Everyone can do whatever the fuck they want. Now I'm going to shoot my one argument in the foot about black and white and say, look, some groups might have to compromise a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, we've achieved equality a long time ago.
You're gonna hate me for well, not necessarily hate me, but you're gonna hate this point. You've just given a brilliant example of white male privilege there, and I know that's something that people cringe at, but just hear me out for a second. You say that some groups have to compromise potentially, but you'll notice that it's not you that's having to compromise, and therefore you're okay with saying it's equality. If you're one of those groups that does have to compromise, I dare say it doesn't feel very much like equality.
Okay. White male privilege, first off, doesn't exist. Second off, we have to compromise all the fucking time. Like,
how so?
How?
Yeah.
Okay, we're typically the scapegoat for everyone.
Well, that's not you having to do anything, is it? That's something being put upon you.
Okay.
That's not you having to change your life in any way.
Okay. How do women have to compromise anything? How? Where?
Well, they have to compromise, as we discussed earlier, going into higher paid professions in order to follow their innate biological drive to, and indeed their societal necessity.
That's not a compromise. That's a choice. That's not a compromise. That's a choice.
A compromise. Well, hang on. You're drawing a very false distinction there. A compromise is always a choice. Of course it is. What else would you describe a compromise as?
Okay, here's a compromise. Take transgender people.
Right.
I think they should use the bathroom of their birth assigned gender unless they've gone the full 9 yards, gotten the surgery, and at a glance you can't tell that they were once at one point a man.
Right.
That's a compromise, you know.
Yeah,
I'm not infringing their rights. I'm just saying, could you go to this other bathroom, please, for a couple of minutes? Not in truth, anyone actually kind of gives a shit. But
yeah, exactly, yeah. But that's the point. There are two choices involved there. There's the choice that you have made to make that compromise. The choice that you decided that's where your line is, and you're asking that the transgender person who might be able to pass normally anyway, but hasn't gone the full 9 yards, for instance, and so let's say it's a transgender woman, but still has a penis. You're asking that person to make the choice to go into what they would consider and what I would consider and what the medical establishment considers is the incorrect bathroom for them. That's a choice you're asking them to make.
Yeah.
And that's a compromise that you are never going to have to make because, well, unless you discover you're transgender at some point down the line, that's not a choice you're ever going to have to make. So that's a privilege that you have that some transgender people do not have.
Yeah, but that's kind of the compromise.
You just said yeah, no, but you said that your privilege doesn't exist, but you've just agreed with me that that's a privilege you have, that transgender
That's not a privilege. That's just the way I'm hardwired.
Well, it doesn't matter if that's the way you're hardwired. That's still a thing that you don't have to do.
I'm not saying they should be, beaten up or whatever, but just for the comfort of the vast majority of everyone, could they maybe go to the bathroom? Same thing as I say to a breastfeeding mother. For the comfort of everyone else, could you get a pump in a goddamn bottle? I don't.
Right, but what about if they haven't done that? What about if, for instance, they're caught short and they need to breastfeed in public? What is the problem you have with that?
Go to the bathroom.
What about if there isn't a bathroom available?
Most public places have a public bathroom. If there's not a bathroom publicly available, there's your car. Go to the end of the parking lot.
That's you imposing your shit on other people. because you think you have the right to tell other people that that's how they should live their lives.
Everyone thinks
Partly
they have
because
every right. Everyone thinks they have the right
I,
to tell everyone else how to live their life.
I certainly don't. I don't try and impose my shit on people like that. If people want to breastfeed, I don't mind. If someone, like for instance, a lot of people from an older generation might be uncomfortable with watching gay people kiss in public. Tough shit. You don't get to decide what people are allowed to do in public in that way. Obviously, like with extreme cases like nudity or something like that, that's different. But
well, why? Why shouldn't a nudist be allowed to be naked all the time? I mean, if we're going down this road of everyone can do whatever the fuck they want and no one can say shit, you know, why can't gay guys blow each other in the park?
Well, there's not a necessity to do that, is there? There is with something like breastfeeding. If a child's hungry and screaming, there is a necessity to feed that child. If a man's got a boner, there's not a necessity for his gay lover to blow him in the park. That doesn't have to happen, does it?
Well, it doesn't have to happen that they have to use the bathroom that they think they need to.
No, it doesn't have to. But if you're going to have the right for everyone to use the bathroom of their gender, then they should be allowed to use the bathroom of their fucking gender.
Again. But
I don't care. I don't care if you want to perform oral sex on a woman or a man in a public park. That's not the point, is it? I'm saying that no one has the right to do that. I'm saying everyone has the right to use a public restroom, and they should have the right to use the public restroom of the gender that they are.
Okay, so say a person who dresses like a man, acts like a man, but just says that they're a woman. Should he be allowed to use the women's bathroom? Now, all he's done so far in his transformation is essentially like a Riley Dennis. Okay, I'll go so far as that. Wears girly clothing, but you can tell pretty damn clearly he's a guy. Okay? Like, where is your line to somebody just saying something to them actually being trans?
No, sorry, I'm going to have to bring you up here. Riley Dennis is not a man. Riley Dennis is a woman. I mean, that's just true. She's a transgendered woman. I think it's very rude of you to suggest otherwise.
She has no desire to have the surgery. She's still got her cock and balls.
It doesn't always happen. Well, so does Blair White.
At least Blair White got tits installed.
What difference does that make?
Where is your line? So a guy, basically me walking down the street, if I say I'm a woman, I should be able to go into the women's bathroom, is what you're saying.
Warcorpse. Well, basically, yes, in the sense that nothing's going to stop you. Say if the concern is there are going to be male predators. For a start off, I find it incredibly misandrous that you think that all men are going to want to go into other people's restrooms and rape little girls. But that's essentially the argument that's being made.
I'm trying to get this argument clarified of where does transgenderism begin? Because yes, there is a law that says I can't go into the women's bathroom. At least here in Minnesota.
Yeah,
but they're trying to change it to say, oh, well, if you identify as female, you can. Well, all you got to say to identify as female is just say I'm a woman.
Yeah, but Warcorpse, if for instance, let's go down the line that the anti-trans people at least are pushing. The fact is they don't like trans people. That's why they don't want to accommodate trans people. But let's go down the line that they're using as quote unquote logic. They think that there are going to be, say, men, and it's always this way around. Men to be women in order to get into bathrooms and rape, or be generally perverted in some way toward whatever. Let's say, for instance, that you are a person that does that. There's nothing stopping you doing that anyway, regardless of whether there's also a law against you going into anyone's toilet and raping anybody. There's nothing stopping you from actually doing it. There are not armed guards in the fucking Costco toilets. If you wanted to go in there and do something, you could go in there and fucking do something. Why are we imposing upon trans people in a way that is entirely unnecessary to stop a problem that mainly doesn't exist, that wouldn't be stopped by it not being in place anyway?
Well, first off, because people are a little more vigilant about it. Now, yes, of course, the odds of something actually happening where a guy, woman goes into the bathroom of the opposite gender and causes a problem are probably pretty rare. But, you know, again, you're kind of you're kind of allowing it to happen a little bit more, a little bit.
No.
Just
no,
and again, where is the line? This is, and also, what if a private? Speaking of Costco, Costco's a private business. What if they don't want to let trans use the bathroom of their choice and have them use the bathroom of their birth assigned sex? Do we dictate they shouldn't be allowed to do that? And again, I'm trying to get a line with you, Kevin. Where is the line between
in the same way that we dictate that they're not allowed to sell children? There are lots of rules we impose upon private companies in order to allow them to operate in public, because they're operating in public. It's not the private residence of somebody. And if they want to operate in public and they want to have public toilets for the convenience of their customers, then they should have to allow transgender people to go into the bathroom of their actual gender. And the point is, ultimately, the law saying transgender people are allowed to go into the toilet or not. Lots of transgender people are already going into those toilets anyway, and no one has a fucking problem with it. It just happens, okay? There are lots of people, like we say with Blair White. Blair White still has cock and balls, by all accounts, but can still go into a woman's toilet because she passes as a woman. She hasn't, as far as we're aware, gone and fucking raped anybody. It's not a massive problem. And whether you have the law in place or not, it doesn't stop someone who wants to go into the women's toilet and rape a woman from doing so. It's an irrelevance. It doesn't have an impact on the situation whatsoever.
I hate to bring this up. Blair White's a woman until she drops her pants. Then she's a guy. She's got a cock and balls. She's a guy.
That's not how it works. Gender
okay,
and
Kevin,
sex are different
I hate
things.
to bring this up. Would you screw Riley Dennis?
She's not my type, mate. She's not my type. I'm not.
Yeah, because you're presumably a straight guy. I mean,
yes, but also that it's different. And also, I don't know her. I've never met her, so I don't know her.
Okay, would you date if you seen a girl in a bar? Would you date her if you knew she was packing the same genitalia as you?
It would be weird. I'll be honest. I'm not going to lie about that. That would be a strange thing. But I get around it because I don't see that it's a massive problem. If you like someone as a human being, I don't think we should boil people down to their genitals. That seems like a really reductionist way of looking at the world.
Kevin, I can be friends with Riley Dennis. It probably wouldn't work. I can be friends with Blair White, but as for wanting to fuck him, yeah, it does boil down to genitalia.
Alone.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, unless you're literally saying you want to suck dick.
No, you don't have to suck dick. I'm sure there are other things you could do.
If you're dating someone that has this male genitalia, you've got like two options. You know, again, I've watched some of Blair White's videos. I think they're a little boring, but I got nothing against her. Riley Dennis is a little more annoying because he wants to try to think that somehow me not wanting to fuck someone that has the same equipment as I do.
I have a problem with Blair White in that she's completely anti-science when it comes to trans people.
But
that's undoubtedly true. The medical establishment have had their say on the matter, and they disagree with Blair White 100%. It would appear. But you know, other than that,
since we're going on this thing of trans, and since you won't clarify your position of what you consider trans and what you consider, like, let's just say a cross-dresser, when does that end? Do we allow people to be trans species? If they think they're a wolf, do we allow them to be a wolf? Also, there's another movement. This is the trans-abled community where they're crippling themselves.
Yeah, those people are fucking mentally unwell. Warcorpse, there's a difference, and I think it's a rather dangerous straw man you're getting into here. because there is no one really, like for instance, the famous example is Rachel Dolezal, who describes herself as transracial. Transracial isn't a thing.
Why can't it be?
That's her wanting to be black, but she's not. I mean, transracial just isn't a thing. Transgender is a medically assigned thing. It's a medical designation, right? It's not you
Yes.
decided to be male one day or you decided to be female one day. It's what you are innately.
The thing is that like true blue transgenderism is actually incredibly rare. Most of these people are on this somewhere on the scale of basically most. Here's how I would describe Riley Dennis. He's a guy that likes to dress in women's clothing and look girly, but that's about it. He's just an effeminate dude in women's clothing. That's it.
No, she's a female Warcorpse.
No, she's not.
That's that. Well, yes, she is, and I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding on your part which leads you down that path. But also, you say a spectrum. That's interesting because you seem to apply the same black and white thinking that you've done with other topics, and also to ascribe to the gender binary, but you've just described it as a spectrum. So that seems like a rather interesting dichotomy on your part.
Well, here's the thing. Like you got because. Well, look, I think true blue transgenderism is incredibly rare. I say if you've gotten the surgery, okay, you've switched teams. But most of these people that are quote unquote trans, they're not doing the surgery. They're just wearing clothing.
There's a
and
part of the
also, you said that Costco should be forced by the law.
Yeah.
To make the, I mean, where does private businesses rights end or begin, you know, where they can run their business as they see fit?
Well, public safety and equality.
How is it unsafe if a trans person goes into their
public safety and equality?
Oh, and equality. Well, they've already achieved equality. They're not getting charged more.
Well, no, they haven't.
They're not being banned from the store.
If they're denying them the ability to use the bathroom of their gender, that's not equality.
Well, then here's what the trans can do. They can go to Sam's Club, who will cater to them. This is why capitalism is so great.
My point is, though, if we're going to have publicly available facilities, they have to be available on a basis of equality.
Okay.
That's just a basic fundamental of human civilization, I would suggest.
Then why is it in your country and in my country, Muslims don't have to abide by that rule? Muslim bakers refuse all the time to bake gay wedding cakes, and nobody says shit. Huh?
Well, I think they should have to, personally.
But nobody cares. You know, the same thing is...
Okay, well, start a petition then. Start a petition, start a movement to get Muslim bakers. I don't see that it's a massive problem, but if you want to, I would happily support that because I think Muslim bakers should have to bake cakes. If you're going to provide a public service, it has to be provided on a basis of equality and public safety. Once you've done that, it's your business. You can do what you want. You can charge what you want. You can employ whatever people you want as long as it's, again, done equally and all the rest of it.
Here's my view of it. You're open to the public, but you're a private company. You're stepping on private property when you enter a store. If they do something or sell something or won't service you because of whatever, your right is to trash them on Yelp, and particularly in the internet age, that's a death sentence. And you just go and you find another fucking bakery or wholesaler or retail store that will cater to you.
Okay,
I'm so sick and tired.
So let's say then, to give another more blatant example, let's say Target decide they don't want to serve black people.
And
would you be okay with that?
Okay, then this is what would happen. And no, I wouldn't be okay with it. But again, They're private businesses. I would denounce the decision. That's the other thing. We can all do a massive, but here's what would happen. Black people would go shop at Walmart. Everybody would hate Target. And within a couple of months, Target would be out of business. Problem solved.
Okay, let's say they wanted to stop white men called Dave doing it. Would you be okay with that? Would that be something you wouldn't feel necessarily that bad about?
I just go home. I just do my shopping again at Walmart.
Okay, what about if
Go
Walmart
home,
they didn't want to
fuss.
Okay, what about if Walmart decided they didn't want to serve men who play video games? What about if each individual store finds a reason not to serve you, and it becomes you that's the problem?
Okay, let me ask you the question, particularly in video games. What if Walmart decides to stop carrying video games? Now, they're not catering to me, but do I have the right to say, well, you as a publicly owned company, you have to have every single freaking fucking product that I want? That's
no, because
not reality.
No, it's not reality, because, and also it shouldn't be something that the law caters for, because, like I say, it's public safety and equality. Video games don't come into that. It's not infringing. It's not infringing upon equality, and it's not an unsafe public practice to not sell video games.
But it's technically not equality because I don't have any. I don't have games that cater to me.
No, but the point is, the private business isn't doing something unsafe or unequal for you. In the same way that if it's not a specific store, like I mean, unless you're going to go down a really, really bizarre line of saying that a video game store that doesn't carry the game that you want is unequal or some shit like that, because that's a specialized store or something. Mind you, I don't know why they wouldn't sell it or wouldn't be able to get hold of it, but whatever. I suppose in that case, you might have some very, very vague case. But with a generalized store, like a supermarket or something, they don't need to sell everything, because that's not their business necessarily at all. But basically, my point was to try and get you to imagine what it's like being, and again, this is the point of privilege. You know you're never going to be part of one of those groups that's going to be shit on by Walmart or Target or whoever, because you're a white straight man. So you're never going to have experience those kind of problems that transgender people have, and that black people have, and that gay people have.
Again, I say privilege doesn't exist. Everyone's equal under the law.
Yeah, under the law, but it doesn't mean that the law is applied equally, does it?
But
it doesn't mean that the law is applied equally. Rape is illegal, but look at the pitiful amount of fucking convictions you get. Look at the thousands of untested rape kits that there are. The law is not taken seriously by the people who are supposed to implement the fucking law.
Okay, the reason rape has the quote-unquote pitiful numbers is not because of some weird patriarchy thing that we just dismiss rape as not that big of a deal. It's because women don't go to the fucking hospital soon enough. If you want a rape conviction, you have to have some form of proof. And her good word isn't enough. Because look at what happened with Emma Sokowitz.
I've literally just mentioned to you something that shoots that down, because your advice is to go to the hospital and get a rape kit, right? Thousands of women have done that in the United States and have not even been able to start the process of getting any semblance of justice, because those are lying in labs untested, because the police have decided to assign finances to other areas. So they're not even going to test them.
Well, you'd have to send me a link on that.
They've taken themselves through that process. That's a disgusting abuse. That is a society that is, or a law enforcement community that is saying, basically, we don't take this very seriously.
Okay. What if the woman says she was raped, and then the police officer asks, well, and here's the other thing. Feminism has really diluted and distorted what it means to be raped. Rape used to be simple. Rape was fucking rape. But now they're saying that any sex you regret is rape. Drunk sex is rape. I
don't know that
they're saying everything under the sun is rape. A guy whistles at you on the fucking street. Rape.
Well, I will agree with you to the point where I think some people have diluted it, but I don't think there are many people who are saying that sexual regret is rape. I think there are very few people actually saying that. Very few serious people
Have
saying
you
that.
have you looked at a college syllabus course on the subject? Because no, the exact opposite is true.
I've not, but if you want to provide me with a link for that, I'll be more than happy to look at it, certainly. But I agree with you to the point where I think some people have. There was the famous video, which I know you did a response to because I put it in the Scent of Manosphere thing about the Indian video where she was saying, "Oh, I've been raped millions of times in elevators and blah blah blah," and basically she was saying she was being stared at or catcalled. Now that's not right, clearly, and to dilute it in that way is ridiculous. But I don't think that's the serious part of what feminists are asking for.
Okay, another one they keep hammering on is drunk sex is rape. No, it's not. You were just drunk. Unless you want to file mutual rape charges against one another.
Well, if someone was blind drunk, I think you could very much argue that you've been taken advantage of.
What if the guy's also blind drunk?
Yeah, like you say, it probably is a mutual thing then, isn't it?
No, it's always mutual. The one exception I'll give is if the guy slips her a fucking gimmick in her drink and she's passed out. If she's passed out and he's still conscious and he's if he's not also blind drunk and passing out himself.
Well, this is the point. What about if he's sober and she's blind drunk? You can perfectly well understand that being taking advantage.
If she's conscious for it, then no. It's not rape.
Even if she's really fucking drunk, but still not unconscious. Is that the level you're drawing? Because I would suggest that you're putting yourself in legally dangerous territory.
Okay. If I'm blackout drunk and get behind the wheel of my car and drive through, a donut shop, I'm held legally responsible for my actions. If I buy something or sign for a loan, you can be drunk. Why is sex this
true? But you're the only, because it's not a sole activity, is it? You're the one getting into the car and driving. Sex takes more. Well, generally takes more than one person, doesn't it?
Generally. So, here's the thing, though. Yeah. She says, "I want to fuck you." She's drunk. You're, let's say, tipsy or buzzed, because most of the time you both have been drinking. But let's say she's a lightweight and you're a heavyweight, and you have sex.
We both are. Let's be honest. Me and you are both heavyweights.
Okay, but that's a really dangerous line to go down to say. And again, it's always for the woman, never for the guy who a sober girl might have jumped his drunk bones. In that instance, not only does nobody give a shit, but also he can be nailed for child support.
I would suggest that's far more rare, generally, because if you're blind drunk, whiskey dick is a significant issue in the mechanics of that event, which means that it's statistically, I would suggest, insignificant. Nothing's insignificant because it is still rape, yes, of course, but statistically not a negligible number of instances that are taking place there. Compared to the opposite.
I would love to know the number of fathers who fucked a chick while they were drunk and now are paying child support because the woman wanted to get pregnant. That happens far more often than you think, Kevin.
Okay, but the difference is, you said earlier that you didn't want to have to pay for abortions, right?
Okay.
You can, if you're going to say that in that scenario he shouldn't have to pay child support, you and other taxpayers are going to have to pay for that potentially in some way, in some form, either for her to have the abortion, or for her to give it up for adoption, or to pay for basic necessities because the woman can't work because she's now raising a kid.
She can work.
Someone's going to have to pay. Someone's going to have to pay for that down the line.
She can work.
What about if she decides not to?
She decides not to work. Then I would tell her, get a husband.
No, but Warcorpse. My point is, what does the government do in that scenario? Does the government allow them to starve?
What does the government do? Okay, so you're asking...
The kid has done nothing wrong in that scenario. The kid shouldn't have to be punished. So what do you do in that scenario? Somewhere down the line, the government picks up the check.
Okay, so
Unless,
So in
unless the
this
father,
scenario,
who is
okay, so you're first off, you're assuming that child support only goes to the kids.
no, it doesn't. But it pays part of the way, doesn't it?
Okay, so
It pays part of the way for the kids' upbringing.
why should a guy that wants nothing to do with this kid sign away his parental rights? The woman at that point still keeps it. That's on her. You know, why
Okay, but
should
my
he have
point.
to pay for a kid that he didn't consent to making?
Okay, but why should I have to pay for it when I had literally I didn't even get to fucking come? So why the fuck should I have to pay for it as a taxpayer?
Well, it's generally your side that loves welfare. So
No,
if
but
it
my
was for
point.
me, if I had to create a solution, I'd say I'll give her the free abortion. At least then I won't have to pay for the damn thing.
But what about if she chooses not to have an abortion?
Get a job?
What about if she decides not to get a job or can't find a job?
I don't know then. Tough fucking shit. I guess we'll have to do something for welfare, but I think there should be a limit.
Exactly.
Get you back to work.
Exactly. So I, as a taxpayer, and you as a taxpayer, have to pay for the drunken decision of this man. Why the fuck is that fair? Why is it fair?
Jesus Christ, how many fucking babies are we paying for anyway?
No, but that's my point. I don't have a particular problem with paying for the upbringing of children because I live in a society with these children, and I'd rather them not be fucking tearaways, half-starved, desperate, fucking wanting to stab or shoot me for £10 or whatever, right? It's not. That's not the point I'm making. My point is, why should I have to pay for it in lieu of him having to pay for it when it was his fucking decision? I didn't make the decision to drunkenly fuck this woman. He did. He should have to pay for that, not me.
Okay. Here's my thing. Unless, okay, first off, as we are right now, let me answer it with this. Women hold all the cards when it comes to pregnancy. Guys are basically screwed. We have no say. Why should the guy be forced to pay for a kid that he doesn't want? I say men should have some form of abortion. Why should it be only the women making these decisions? I realize they're the only ones that carry the goddamn thing.
Exactly. This is where biology is inescapable, because it's only the woman that takes the medical problem on herself. That's it. The man, once his part of the business is done, whilst they were drunk in this case, his part is over. It's the woman that then decides whether she wants to take on the medical danger involved. And I know obviously it's much less than it was, say, 100 years or 200 years ago. Very few statistically now die in childbirth, but there is still obviously huge medical impact on a woman's body by having children. Even one child can be potentially ruinous for a woman's figure and the psychological issues that come along with that in society and all the rest of it. And so it can only really be morally and indeed legally, thankfully, her decision when it comes to that. I don't see that the man can or should be given a choice in that.
Oh, so what you're saying is, in this area, men should just not have a voice, be totally unequal. If they don't want to have a kid and they sign away their parental rights, men shouldn't have an option. We're stuck paying for a damn thing until it's 18. Yeah, what if the woman assaults the guy? What if she knocks him out? And you do know it's actually easier to rape a man than it is a woman.
I don't think that's actually true. I'll be interested to hear your discussion here.
Okay. It's true. It's tougher for the woman to incapacitate the man. However, if she does, he's going to blow. Why should he have to pay for that baby?
No, in that case, I don't think he should, because that's rape. Yeah. In the same way that actually I don't think, and it's certainly the case in certain states in America, that when a man rapes a woman, he still has paternity rights in certain states. Now that's disgusting. He shouldn't have any right to that kid at all.
I typically agree with no, he shouldn't have any paternity rights if he did rape her. I tend to agree with that. Because
and in the case of the woman raping the man, I don't think he should be on the hook financially, because that's not a choice he made. That's not a decision he engaged in. He was taken advantage. He was the victim of a fucking crime.
Well, I tend to think that if a guy doesn't want to take care of a kid, he should be able to sign a paper that gets him off the hook, but he gives up all parental rights and he never contacts the kid.
Well, that then leaves you in a very strange situation of being, at least in part, against welfare, but taking it upon yourself and myself. I know we're in different countries, but just for the sake of argument, the taxpayer, to pay for the mistake of this man. Now, I don't think that's fair on me or you or any other taxpayer for that matter.
Believe it or not, I don't think it'd be any different than what's going on right now. Honestly.
Well, it would be that we're taking on 100% of the cost instead of however much percent of the cost we're now taking on. You're putting more burden on the taxpayer in order to allow an irresponsible douche off the hook, who's then probably going to go and do it again and sign his fucking parental rights away again, which leaves us with another fucking another kid to pay for. What's to stop him doing that 10 times or 20 times? Well, you know what?
Well, nothing. But the thing is, that happens now. I mean, how many people on welfare would you say right now, the way it is right now, have kids just for the money?
There are probably a few, yeah.
There's more than a few.
Well, you know, I'm just saying that, yeah, there are lots, but I don't know the numbers specifically. But yeah, there are some people that do that. Yeah.
But, well, first off, to debate welfare is a whole nother topic, because I think the whole thing should be rebuilt, so people can get the fuck off of it. But that's a whole nother debate. But no, I typically think that, and again, what happens if in a divorce case the dad loses all parental rights anyway? Well, why should he have to pay for it then?
Well, because that's a completely different matter.
He's decided he wanted not seeing his kids. He can't see his kids, but he still has to pay for them.
Yeah, well, because someone has to pay for them, and he has the responsibility to pay for them. They're his fucking kids. They're not my kids. Well, I've decided not to have kids, partly because I don't want to incur the cost of having children. That person made a different decision. He should have to pay for it. The fact that he lost his rights, and I agree with you actually to a point that you made at the beginning, that I think something vastly urgently needs to be done about the way in which men are treated in custody cases. Although I think it is, to be fair, I think it is slightly overblown by some MRAs and MGTOWs, but I think there is something that needs to be done about that. But the point is, if you go through that process and you lose custody, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have to pay for them, because you still made the decision to create these children. I didn't. I shouldn't have to pay.
You know, with your point about not paying for them, you sound a lot like me. I tend to agree. I don't want to pay for kids I didn't have. Granted, we're in a society where I don't exactly want kids on the street half starving, but again, the welfare system's got to be reworked anyway.
Yeah, I'm not against welfare in total at all. I'm very much in favour of having a safety net, a social safety net in place. That means that you don't have starving children. But I also don't want it being overly burdened by irresponsible dickheads who decide they want to knock people up when they're drunk and then just wipe their hands of it. In virtually no other situation in society do we allow people to just wipe their hands clean of a situation and walk away untouched. If you make decisions, there are responsibilities to be accepted because of those decisions.
But again, okay, here's another question. What if the guy really wants that baby and the woman wants an abortion? Where do you come down on that?
Well, again,
and he doesn't take it. Now,
that's where I think if she decides she wants to have, like, say if he goes to her, he should be able to bid for the kid or whatever. I don't know. Not financially. I'm not suggesting we start a system of selling children. I mean, like, if he's able to talk to her and they come to some sort of arrangement whereby she will carry the child essentially as a surrogate, even though it is technically her kid, but you know what I mean? And he gets to keep it, and then she revokes her right or whatever. That is some sort of arrangement that could be come to. But ultimately, if she decides she wants an abortion, because she is the only one who takes on the medical, potentially the life-threatening medical problem of having a child, a very stressful medical problem that is, that only she can be able to make that decision. I don't think the man should be able to force her to do anything different. And that's just biology. There's no way around that. Men can't give
birth, and that's kind of getting back to the trans thing. That's something that a lot of trans women have an issue with. Is you're never going to be a woman. You're never going to get to have kids. Not growing inside of you anyway.
Well, that's not the definition of a woman. There are women that are infertile, cis women that are born that are infertile or decide not to have children. Or what about women that get to a certain age and can no longer have children? Does that mean they stop being women? That's not a good definition of a woman, is it really?
Well, okay, but one of the joys of being a woman is having that thing growing inside of you.
Perhaps, but I also don't like the idea of my genitals being torn apart by its exiting. But that's just me on a personal level. Other people seem to disagree in their billions, so, you know.
But I suppose point number 3 is, how do you justify using violence? And I'm specifically talking about the Sean Spicer incident.
Richard Spencer.
Who the fuck is Sean? Oh, God, Trump's fucking jag-off press secretary.
Yeah.
How do you justify using violence against somebody that you don't agree with? Because you went on a rant a little bit ago about how you don't want to deplatform anyone.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference between deplatforming someone, say like Milo Yiannopoulos, who I disagree with enormously, and stopping out-and-out fascists. And I suppose it could be argued to a degree that Milo has certain fascistic tendencies, but I don't think he's at that point. And it's obviously a point that has to be reached within the mind of any individual. But there's a difference between, and this is the kind of the core straw man of the position of my position and the position of many anti-fascist people. When you say, how do you justify the use of violence against people you disagree with? That's not the totality of the situation. It's not that I disagree with them. Like, for instance, I disagree with you, Warcorpse. I wouldn't call for violence against you because I don't see you as an existential threat to Western civilization. And that's not to denigrate you or your positions. I just mean generally, I don't see you as being an undemocratic, genocidal fucking maniac. Whereas people like not Spice. Fuck's sake, I've got fucking Sean Spicer in my head now. Richard Spencer. Ironically, we would mix Sean Spicer up considering he was sort of doing genocide denial in the week. Brilliant. Well done, Sean, you prick. Anyway, Richard Spencer advocate, or so him and parts of his groups, a group, MPI, have advocated for genocide, have argued for the reinstitution of slavery, have argued that black people aren't fully human. And I think the people that do that and have, to some degree, the ear of the president of America, let's not forget, are an existential threat to the very core of Western civilization that I hold dear. And that is something that I will defend with my life if necessary. And I'm not saying this is the internet hard man. I'm saying that as a free human being who wishes to remain so, because just because I'm a white straight man doesn't mean I would avoid their wrath if they were able to implement it, because I'm also a trade unionist, I'm also a socialist, whatever. I would undoubtedly fall under their wrath eventually. And indeed, as the Nomo poem says, first they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. Eventually they will get round to you, because that's what hate does. Hate feeds upon itself, and every group in society will eventually be targeted because they're not being white enough or Aryan enough or Western enough or whatever particular brand of bullshit they do. And so I would, and it's rare that I would do this, but I pray and aid the words of Adolf Hitler when he said that, and he has some expertise in this because he did, of course, take over a democratic, progressive nation, an institute of fascist dictatorship. And he said that if at the start of that process they had been violently opposed by their opposition, it almost certainly would have stopped them. And I think it's worth mentioning that because he knows what he's talking about. He went through that process. And I think if you look at things like the Battle of Cable Street, which you might not necessarily know about, but I think a lot of British people will know about it in the 1930s when fascists tried to march into a Jewish area of East London, and were physically opposed by the people, not just the Jewish people, but they're just generally the people of the area, and were repelled. And it was the high point of the British Union of Fascists, and they were repelled and eventually destroyed. And I think that's what we need to do with people like Richard Spencer. It's not that I like the institution, inflicting violence upon people, but when violence is the only recourse they've allowed left open because they wish themselves to implement genocide, I think it's fine to use physical resistance against people who would seek to destroy Western society.
Okay. So, in a roundabout way, you're for deplatforming somebody like Richard Spencer. Here's my solution with him. Pretty much everything he says, I can't stand. But I'd let him say it, and then in my counter argument, destroy him.
Right, but in what forum is this taking place? Because he doesn't get involved in conversations, does he? He's not interested in a debate with anybody. He just wants to spew his bullshit.
Then on my forum, I will destroy his bullshit. And I found it funny that you're against Nazis, but you also claimed you're a socialist.
Why is that remotely amusing?
Because Nazis are socialists.
No, they're not.
The National Aryan Socialist Party, or whatever the fuck it was.
The National Socialist German Workers' Party, yes. You're also ignoring the word national there. It's a very important one because I'm an internationalist. I'm not a nationalist.
Well,
there's a very, very important difference there. I'm also for public works projects, but that doesn't mean I'm a Nazi.
Well, I'm a capitalist, really, but
yeah, well, exactly, and not just that. But for instance, if you're going to go down that literalist line, then the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea sounds like a brilliant place to live, doesn't it? But it's not. It's just the name of the thing.
Well, that's true. It
doesn't actually represent it. So,
but I'm a capitalist, but some of the more libertarian arguments are a little ridiculous to me, like having the roads private. That would be an ungodly mess.
I would give you an even better one than that. I saw someone the other day arguing that the atmosphere of the Earth should be privatized.
How the fuck are you going to do that?
Well, exactly. You would have to literally pay to breathe. Brilliant. Absolutely fucking outstanding idiocy. Well done.
Well, there's there's people trying to sell parts of Mars and Venus and Mercury. Yeah, that parcel of land will come in handy. Anyway, first off, there's no chance, zippo chance of Spencer gaining any sort of mainstream political power. Nobody's voting for this. It's like when Trump was elected and everyone's saying the KKK was behind it. There's 5,000 members of the KKK. They don't get on TV. They don't get their books published by any publisher whatsoever. Their voice is this annoying whisper, and that's what Spencer's voice is. It's not going to grow. Hitler rose to power in Germany under a very, very specific set of circumstances. And those conditions, first off, don't exist right now. And second off, I don't think they'll ever exist again because Hitler controlled the narrative. And nobody can control the narrative anymore, despite old media's attempt to do so.
Yes.
So my thing is, violence isn't the answer. The best way to beat a jag-off like Spencer is simply to just basically mock him on your forum. That's, and if Okay, but I suppose keep an eye on him just to make sure he's relegated to screaming at the airport hub selling pencils from a cup and doesn't actually start to gain any traction. Then try to call him out for a debate. As for Milo Yiannopoulos, again, Milo Yiannopoulos, he's pretty much harmless. He does say a bunch of shit that I agree with him about half the time. Then he says stuff that's completely stupid.
Yeah, I'll bring you back briefly to the point you say about keeping an eye on Richard Spencer to make sure he doesn't grow in popularity or in influence. At what point would you say it's safe to just allow him to grow? Because once he starts to grow and starts to gain some momentum, by that point it could already be too late. That could be a snowball effect that you can't stop anymore. I'd rather snuff this. The example I would give would be like the Great Fire of London. It was said that when it first started, a woman taking a piss on it could have put it out, but they allowed it to grow, thinking it wouldn't grow so much, and it destroyed an entire city. And I see fascism growing in quite that way. That if you can snuff it out whilst it's a tiny little house fire, the more the better, because eventually that fire will spread.
Well, this is the thing. But if you want to keep it to that little fire, free speech is the answer. Let him have his say.
The people of Nazi Germany, the people of Weimar Germany had free speech. It didn't stop Hitler.
Hitler got control of the narrative. That's
they had exactly, but he was able to gain control of the narrative.
And also,
people had free speech.
We're not a country that just got destroyed by a war. Germany was in ashes at the time. See, if you want to talk about the rise of Hitler, you have to talk about what led up to him. That is nowhere near where we are in America. Okay.
Okay, true. But for instance, you have other. I mean, Nazi Germany is not the only fascist example you can use. It's the most famous, and that's why I brought him up specifically. But Mussolini's rise wasn't in exactly the same way. The rise of Salazar or of Franco weren't exactly the same situations either. And the point you make is quite good about the very specific set of circumstances that allowed Hitler to rise. How do we know what the very specific set of circumstances could be in America that would allow for the rise of someone like Spencer? Because you mentioned, for instance, that it's difficult to get hold of the narrative. You have to get hold of any narrative anymore. When you have the hiving of little bubbles of media, you don't necessarily have to control any narrative anymore, because you already have your supporters believing exactly what you want them to believe, and that could be enough in the modern era to get people on side.
I'm gonna go to the free speech defense. Is when he starts spouting his bullshit, the vast majority of us are not going to agree with it, and the vast majority of us are going to denounce it with this little thing called facts. Every one of the dictators that rose to power did so in a time when you could kind of control information. You can't do it now. I don't see where he can grow. Again, there's 5,000 members of the KKK. What are they going to do, even if all of them mobilized? They cause maybe a small riot, but that happens on college. But hell, the Lakers fans cause more destruction than that.
Yeah, well, indeed. Certainly far more destruction than their team winning only 26 games this year. Yeah, that's right. Fuck you, Lakers, you little bitches. Anyway, a little bit of trash talk for you there. Yes, the point you make about controlling the narrative and facts winning out in the end, I think belies the point I was making, or backs up the point I was making a second ago about ideological bubbles being created by hiving off different types of media. You have in the flat earth movement and the anti-vax movement and the creationist movement, all things that we know are demonstrably bullshit. Facts bear that out. But those movements, certainly say the flat earth and anti-vax movement, have been growing. in recent years. Because if you want to, you can find blogs and YouTube sites and the media outlets that will pump you full of shit. That pump you full of these lies, these obvious fucking lies to any normal person, but not necessarily to someone who wants to be susceptible to it, someone who's looking for some alternative reality to escape into. And I think the growth of those movements puts paid to the concept that just because we've got facts on our side and free speech with which to express those facts, that we can necessarily stop a movement that's enticing and being put forward by slick salesmen, that we can actually put that movement down in some peaceful manner. Because I don't think it's necessarily true anymore.
Okay. Getting back to the first point, Hitler. Well, first off, Hitler came out a lot differently than Spencer. He came on really subtly before anyone knew it. He had basically he got it in the middle of the night, basically. As for, like, you're right. There are, and I've talked about this, I call it bubble living, where you don't want any outside facts, you just want your own narrative. But the anti-vax bubbles kind of burst because, big shock, enough parents didn't vaccinate in a local area, and we've had our first outbreaks of things like measles for the first time in 70 years. So that bubble kind of burst. The flat earthers, I don't know what to do about.
That's sort of my point, though, right? The equivalent with Nazis of the kids getting sick in that that continuation of events. The equivalent would be the foundation of a fascist state, and by that time, people have realised that that's what's happening. It's too fucking late.
But here's the problem.
Whereas with something like the anti-vax movement, it's by comparison relatively harmless, because even though kids are going to get sick, we do have ways of treating them, and we do have. This is going to sound really harsh, but there are we're not running out of kids in the world. There are lots of fucking kids. We're fine in as a species anyway. Which might sound callous, but hopefully people understand where I'm coming from there. Whereas with the foundation of something like that, once the cattle trucks are running into the fucking death camps, it's too late. You can't really stop that. It's a chaotic mess that can only be sorted out essentially by letting the cards fall where they may. And that could be disastrous for humanity, especially in the era now where we can't afford it because we have nuclear weapons now. So the idea of someone like Hitler having nuclear weaponry is fucking terrifying.
But here's the thing. Bubble living when it comes to, like, the vax movement is different to society as a whole. There's not going to be enough of them. There's not.
On what basis have you drawn that conclusion?
Because, okay, I'll give you an example. In 2001, 60% of the country was against homosexual marriage. At least my country. Right now, 15, and the last time they did it, I think it was 16 years later, like 70% of the country is in favor of it. So it's just, it's stuff like that. It's now, Nazi Germany didn't hear the other side of the story. Now you can hear the other side of the story. The only people that Richard Spencer will attract are the far right-wing, nutbally, angry people that want to blame everyone else except the person looking them in the mirror for their fucking problems. Him having a platform does nothing. And in fact, him having a platform is a very good idea so that his ideas can be kind of out in the open and crushed by the light. That Germany and I think Britain and a lot of European countries have anti-Nazi laws. When you drive it underground, it's like a potato or a mushroom. It grows and it festers, and then you have a problem. When you let it be out in the open, and people are free to be as racist and as bigoted or homophobic or what the fuck ever as they want, and they can freely say it and publish it, they can't grow. It's like you take you take a sample and you put it on one of those dish things to grow a culture. Well, if you leave that culture dish open to the air, it'll die, or it'll get contaminated with something else.
Yeah, just for clarification, we don't have those kind of laws here in Britain, but they do exist in Germany. For instance, they only recently, last year, in fact, allowed the first ever new copies, new publications of Mein Kampf to be sold in Germany, and even then they had to have essentially an accompanying pages after each page telling you the proper context of it, so essentially leading you through it by the hand, which is pretty pathetic. I wouldn't be for that kind of law. That seems incredibly silly and pointless, but you know.
So you know, typically, yeah, if you I say, first off, even if somebody's saying something you don't like, and even if it's something that really offends you to the core, you still don't get to hit him. You know, if all he's doing is just talking, no matter what he's saying, you don't get to hit, you don't get to commit assault. You know, same.
Well, my point is not that they should be able to commit assault and get away scot-free with it. You take that risk upon yourself, either of
but you in that video
legal
said
consequences.
It was justified. That he's justified in hitting him. Justified means you're. It's like if somebody breaks into your house using. I'll go with America laws here. If somebody breaks in my house and I shoot them, I'm justified in shooting them.
Right, no, but you're legally entitled to shoot them as well. There's a difference. I'm saying it's morally justified to physically resist Nazis, fascists, right? And again, it's not just anyone I disagree with. If you're a conservative, don't worry, I'm not going to hit you, okay? If you're calling for genocide, I might fucking hit you. Not necessarily I'm going to, but I might do. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not advocating that any individual, I'm not saying you should. I'm not encouraging you necessarily to do that, because again, you take it upon yourself, either the legal ramifications or indeed the fact that the fascists are people. They're going to either try and defend themselves or fight back preemptively. So there are potentials for danger there, and you take it upon yourself because you think that the culture you live in, the civilization you live in, is worth defending to that degree. It's essentially an act of violent disobedience, if that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah, but we also don't have Richard Spencer with his followers marching in the streets, and we're not going to. Like 99.99995% of Americans disagree with everything the man has to say. He's not going to grow to be the next Hitler.
At this point, Hitler, the Nazi Party originally consisted of like 40 people. And it grew to be, at one point, the most powerful armed force in the world. Now that's fucking terrifying. And they could have, had they been able to overwhelm Britain, America probably would have made peace with them, and they'd still be around in some form. That's terrifying to think. And that grew from 40 people in Munich, and within 20 years they'd taken over much of Europe. That's terrifying. And if they'd have been stopped, again, I don't pray and aid the thoughts of Adolf Hitler very often, but I think in this case he has expertise that having actually successfully done this thing, that if he'd been physically resisted in those early days, that movement wouldn't have gotten started.
Well, first off, he was legally elected, but second off,
well, there was legally elected, but the dictatorship wasn't legally installed. Come on now.
He was elected, and Germany just signed everything away to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing.
Yeah, but
he took over Austria. The leader of Austria just signed it away.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, he took over part of Central Europe without firing a shot. But again, the Germany that Hitler rose to power in is totally and utterly different than what we have today. He's not going to get that kind of power. It's just not going to happen.
Well, you say that, but you're using the conditions that exist in America right now, who's to say if, heaven forbid, some sort of war took place where either in Korea or Syria or whatever, and leads to civil disobedience and economic strife in America, that you couldn't see the growth of a Nazi party there.
Well, first
And they
off,
wouldn't call themselves the Nazi party, but you know what I mean, a fascist party.
yes. Okay, I don't think that America can be beaten that badly, especially with no country at the moment on Earth. If
Well,
it was, it would require nuclear weapons, and we'd all be dead.
No, it wouldn't. It doesn't. You don't have to be beaten. America was militarily. If they'd have just ignored any semblance of human rights and public opinion, they would have won the Vietnam War. The Viet Cong, or the Viet Minh as they were officially called, couldn't possibly have survived an onslaught from the American army had they unleashed, but they couldn't do that. It's not a matter of being militarily weaker than anyone else, because obviously America has the biggest army, navy, and air force of anyone in the fucking world by far. That's not the point, is it? Iraq under Saddam Hussein was not a military power that America could possibly compete with America, and yet they were dragged into a quagmire in Iraq. And the same in Afghanistan.
Okay, and we didn't have the rise of Nazis with that. But again, okay, the first Iraq War, we went in, we did what we needed to do, and we got out. The second time, that was a whole other mess. And look, I'll be the first to admit, we didn't plan that one out. You know, the Vietnam War, again, we had another threat at that point. There was another military that was just as powerful as us that theoretically could have gotten involved in it. And there's a lot of problems with the Vietnam War.
But didn't. But the thing is, they didn't, and yet you still lost that war.
Yeah, and also the Vietnamese army was nowhere near as, it wasn't as rinky-dink as you think. And also, it's a jungle country, and we typically don't do too well in jungle campaigns. But again, America wasn't brought to its knees like Germany was. Germany was obliterated after the First World War. They were given a humiliating treaty. So no, it was just the circumstances were not right. And if anything, in the 50s, you had the only shot of white supremacists gaining power, because that's when the KKK was at its fullest, up until they found out their leader was a pedophile, and that destroyed that group.
I'm not suggesting that it's going to happen. All I'm saying is that if punching the occasional Nazi stops any potential for that to take place, I'm prepared to do that, because I think that's a price worth paying, even if, like I say, even if legally or in terms of my own physical safety, that might not be advantageous for me personally.
Okay. What if a feminist is arguing that we should put all men in camps?
Well, I would oppose that as well. Yes.
What about?
I don't think there are significant numbers of those kinds of people, though.
There's not a significant number of Nazis.
I think there are far more, and I think they have more
far more potential because put men in camps or somehow have us as second-class citizens.
And it's not just, well, I think that's a massive straw man, but my point isn't just sheerly numbers. You have someone like Steve Bannon from the alt-right, who, whether you want to call him a Nazi or not, has certain tendencies that are Spencer-esque, let's say, who has the ear of the president. That's a far more immediate danger, I would suggest, than some dickhead on Tumblr saying that we need to castrate all men. Who cares?
The thing is, I think Stephen Bannon got fired, so he's out.
No, he got removed from the National Security Council, but he's still the chief strategist, I believe is his official title.
But again, first off, I'm going to be doing a video on an article that was wrote by a feminist that thinks white men, in particular, shouldn't have voting rights.
Yes, I saw that. That's ridiculous. Yeah. All I can say is I'm part of a Facebook group with a lot of other feminist people, and we've all ripped her to pieces for this. It's a ridiculous article. No one I know that's a feminist agrees with this. This is a piece of clickbait trash, it would appear. But I can understand people being angry about it, because I'm fucking angry about it. I think it's a ridiculous thing to suggest.
But I wouldn't go up and hit her. That's the difference. Again, I don't advocate violence unless somehow Spencer actually starts violently taking over parts of the country.
So you have to wait, and you have to wait until it's too late, or potentially too late, to even do something about the situation.
When the Nazis were using violence, the German government could have crushed them,
and didn't.
And yes, okay, if you want a flat answer, then yes, we have to take that chance. If you believe in free speech, then you have to take that chance. That yes, by some insane chance, this guy could grow.
If you believe in free speech and think it's worth defending, then fucking defend it. Don't sit there and say, oh, well, maybe in 6 months, by which time it might be too late. And okay, 6 months is just a number I plucked out my ass. Let's say 10 years, whatever. In X number of years, by which time it might be too late and he's already taken over in fucking Utah and Arizona or wherever. By which time the ball's rolling and he's getting fucking legislation passed and the camps are starting to open, then we'll physically resist him. No. Let's resist him now and make sure it never gets to that stage.
We do. It's called free speech.
We've seen in many fascist takeovers where liberalism gets you. It doesn't get you the results. Direct action gets results.
Yeah, except the way you beat him is free speech, Kevin. You can't sit there and say you want a moral just society where everyone has the right to say whatever the fuck they want, and then say Richard Spencer doesn't have the right to say it, or that violence against him is justified. It doesn't work that way.
Please do tell me where a well-crafted argument or an online petition stopped Hitler or Mussolini. Because it wasn't, was it?
Well, they didn't have online petitions.
It was okay, or a fucking newspaper article, or a fucking radio show, or whatever, right? It didn't happen. It took tanks and bombs, and because we left it too late, it took the blood of a generation being soaked on the fields of Europe and the Far East, in the case of Japan, for us to crush those movements. Let's not let it get to that fucking stage again. Let's be vigilant about this shit.
Hitler came on like an anesthetic to the Germans and to the rest of the world, actually. Nobody knew anything. Nobody knew his true intentions until it was too late. Now, thankfully, there actually wasn't a way for him to win World War II.
No one, hang on, excuse me, no one knew his you know that Mein Kampf was written whilst he was in prison, before he even made any fucking electoral success, after he'd initially already tried to violently overthrow the democratically elected government in Germany.
And
people did know his fucking intentions, and they voted for him in their droves.
No, they didn't, because Mein Kampf, up until he was elected, literally sat on obscure bookshelves. Nobody bought it. The reason it skyrocketed in popularity was because Hitler, when he was a leader, gave a copy to each and every single new married couple in Germany. That was his wedding gift to them.
Well, that's fair enough, because I mean that's some hot stuff. If anything's going to get you going in the post-marital bedroom, it's reading about Lebensraum. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. But no, he came on, and again, it's you're not going to get that again. He came on way too subtly. He came on way too, and again, if there is someone of a twitch from a president that he wants to expand power, and also look at how far Barack Obama expanded the executive power, and look at how far Bush expanded it. They're both just as guilty.
Yeah, no, look, I'm not suggesting that. And as with all fascist takeovers, it does take the ground being laid by the idiotic actions and the authoritarian actions of supposed liberal with a small l, leaders like Bush or Obama or Trump or whomever. That's the thing. It's laying the ground, and you don't know what the ground is necessarily going to be. how they're going to do it. But in order to, it seems to me, judging by history, the way you ensure that things like free speech and freedom of the press and not having people slaughtered in their millions, the way you defend those very basic principles is by occasionally stepping on people's toes.
I say if you want to have free speech, it's all or nothing.
Well, that's not true.
And the best. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting. There's a slight lag between us. People are listening. Yeah, the point I would make about the supposed free speech absolutism is that doesn't work in practice either. And that's obviously true because, for instance, I assume that you're not crazy and therefore you would support libel laws, for instance.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
So you don't believe in free speech absolutism then? It's not all,
okay.
I think. Again, it's not black and white, it's grey.
I believe that you don't. Okay. If Spicer was literally calling for, okay, as long as he's not saying beat the shit out of this person or kill this person, then you don't got a case. Libel was a really tough one to prove anyway because jokes are protected.
Yeah, no, my point wasn't that I'm accusing him of libel. I'm saying that libel exists, and I think most people, and including both you and I, support it. So therefore, neither of us are actually free speech absolutists. There are instances where you can curb people's freedom of speech.
In a very strict sense of the word, I guess I'm a little gray on. Well, okay, I'm a little gray on most things, but I'm way more open. I say if you're going to have free speech, Spencer Spicer, I want to keep calling him Spicer. He has just as much right to say what he's going to say without getting physically attacked. He can get yelled at. He can be made fun of. He can, and again, he can have his group called all kinds of reprehensible things because for libel to work, you have to lie.
Yeah.
Now, I don't classify him as a Nazi either. I classify him as a neo-Nazi. There's slight differences between the two groups. I say he should be able to have his free speech without interference. And again, you just destroy him with ideas, That's the way. And again, I go the best way that you combat an asshole like that is to let him basically make his argument, and then you leave it out in the field to die.
Well, I think we've made our points on this. I think this is literally just going to be we agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is about where it's going to wrap up because we've been going at it for 2 hours.
That's pretty good.
So yeah, this is the long-awaited debate between Warcorpse 666 and Kevin Logan. Kevin, before I close this out, do you have anything else?
Thank you for having me on. This has been a rite of passage because you may not realise this. You were the first person to ever make a video response to me. The circle of life.
So, yep, it's complete. All righty, I will see everyone later.